So to conclude this tutorial on the basic use of MATLAB, let's investigate the use of actual programming in MATLAB scripts. So quite often in numerical programs, we want to do things which involve a bit more logic than simply sequentially executing simple instructions. Sometimes we want to be able to control the execution of certain structures based on a given condition, whether a number is larger than or equal to 0, whether a certain parameter is equal to true. Or sometimes we want to make a loop, so execute the same statements of code many times after one another. So for this, MATLAB has some programming functionalities available that we will investigate in this tutorial. Now, because we will be writing a program which does some non-trivial things, let's say, let's not directly enter our commands into the command window, but write a script as we did in the initial tutorial, because that allows us to save these execution statements and be able to reiterate on them, be able to write further code based on that certain script. So let's create a new script by clicking New and then selecting Script from the drop-down menu. So we see that a new file has opened in the editor, which currently has no title yet. So I'll immediately save it and give it a name. Let's call it Programming Tutorial MATLAB and save it. Let's give it some documentation. So this is a tutorial for programming in MATLAB. So again, these percentage signs indicate that this is a comment, and this statement is not read by the MATLAB interpreter. Now let's fabricate some kind of idea that we want to execute. It's very fabricated, let's say. It's not very realistic. But the programming that we actually have to do in there is quite common in writing actual numerical code. So for this example, we want to, given a list of numbers v, for each element, if the element is smaller than 0, we want to have it. If the element is between 0 and 3, both included, we want to double it. And finally, if the element is larger than 3, we want to set it to 0. Okay. So let's start with a list of numbers. So I just type some random numbers. Okay, so we have our list of numbers v, this vector of numbers v. And now we want to do something for each element. So we have to loop over the elements of v. So in order to loop in MATLAB, the most basic construction and the most widely used construction is actually the for loop. And the for loop allows you to run a certain extract of code many times based on an index, based on the value of an index. So here we say we use an index variable I, which runs from 1 to the number of elements of v. And this is our for loop. Now this loop, whatever code goes here, so whatever code goes inside of this for loop is executed for I is equal to 1, so that's once, for I is equal to 2, so that's a second time, and this will last up until I is equal to the number of elements of v. And in this case, that is, if I'm not miscounting, that should be 11. Okay. So now we are in this loop. So the element that we actually have here is vi. So that is the element. And if that is smaller than 0, we want to have it. So this is a conditional statement. So we have to check where if vi is smaller than 0, then we want to have it. So we say vi is equal to vi divided by 2. That takes care of this first statement over here. Now, if the element is between 0 and 3, both included, we double it. Okay. So if the first one is not true, we say else if, so it's not smaller than 0, but if it's between 0 and 3, both included, we have to double it. So if vi is larger than or equal to 0, and this is the MATLAB syntax for and, no, that's or, I'm sorry. This is the MATLAB syntax for and. So if vi is larger than 0 and vi is smaller than 3, well, then we double it. Else, if vi is larger than 3, we set it to 0. And this ends our conditional part of this loop. So if vi is smaller than 0, we have it. If it's between 0 and 3, we double it. If it's larger than 3, we set it to 0. Now, we could get rid of this final if as well, because if this is not true and this is not true, then it must be larger than 0 actually, because of simple logic. So we could also just replace this by a simple else statement. Okay, so let's execute this script, and let's take a look at the variable v. So we see that the first element, which was smaller than 0, has indeed been halved. The second element was also smaller than 0, has been halved. 0 has been doubled, 1 has been doubled, 4 is larger than 3, so it has been set to 0, etc. So this gives a kind of simple introduction into how we use for loops to loop over certain extracts of code, to do it multiple times, and how we use these conditional statements based on if, else if, and else conditions to execute code whether or not a condition is fulfilled.